Well, morning, afternoon, evening, welcome along to the Old Classic Car channel. Now, a car that hasn't featured on here much for a little while is this, the 2002 Jaguar XJ8. There's been a lot of comings and goings here at the garage, here at OCC HQ with the old cars mainly, and as a result this one has kind of sort of been pushed to the back of the queue a little bit in terms of keeping up with work that is required. So the purpose of this video is twofold really. One, to update on the Jaguar XJ8, and secondly to also talk about MOTs. MOT is, well, in fact it has actually expired on this one. It did run out a couple of weeks back, so I really need to crack on with that and get it ready for another MOT attempt. The MOT is booked for next week, so that'll be quite exciting. And before I take any car for its MOT, I always like to have a bit of a go through just to check to see if there's anything obvious that I've missed. Now, what this video isn't, it's a fully comprehensive guide to preparing a car for an MOT, because the MOT garages can check things that I'm not able to check here with the tools and equipment and so on that I've got here. For example, I don't have a 4-post lift with that sort of platform thing that they park the cars on, and they can sort of shimmy the suspension around just to sort of test all the ball joints, that kind of thing. I don't have any of that kit here, but there are quite a few things that you can check back at home before going for an MOT that can potentially be MOT failures, and with a bit of preparation you can avoid having problems with if you just do a bit of prep work beforehand. And that is partly what this video is about, an update on the Jag and just some of the things I'll be checking on it before going for the MOT next week. Now, there was one job which I knew I had to do, one sort of non-standard MOT prep job which I've been meaning to do ever since I bought the car, and this has been with us for about a year now. It came with a fresh MOT that was organised by the gentleman in the garage that I bought this from, but obviously this is the first MOT that I've actually put the car through. But it's always had a bit of a clunk from this corner, probably a bush or something like that. And it was also when you do the suspension test, the old leaning on the front corner, that side was always really firm, because this is the XJ8 Sport. It's got fairly firm suspension, but this side was quite wobbly, and like I say, you get a bit of a clunk from there as well. So a couple of weeks ago, I didn't bother filming it, but I did a swap of the front damper, i.e. one of these, the front shock absorber as they're sometimes called, but damper on this side. It's not too bad a job, to be honest, and this is the one that I took off, which is a fairly anonymous looking thing, but that is a front damper. Now, I'm not sure if you can see on there, but the bushings look pretty second hand. It wasn't throwing up any error messages. Now, this car has the so-called CATS suspension, or the adaptive ride suspension, and as a result, to replace these is not a cheap affair. These dampers are actually made by Bilstein, Jaguar branded. You can buy them from Jaguar and they cost many hundreds of pounds. Even this, which was Bilstein but not in a Jaguar box, that was still about £250. Now, normally when you're talking suspension, that kind of thing on a car, you would do both sides at the same time, but 250 quid each just for these. They have like a little electrical connector in there, and they'll sort of adapt to your driving style, so they firm up or soften up depending on how you are driving. But yeah, 250 quid a corner, when the one on the passenger side appears to work fine. That's not going to happen, but one I replaced, and that is that. So it feels a lot better now. When you do the old bounce test, it feels pretty similar on both sides. But like I say, normally on a conventional car with conventional dampers, where the dampers are sort of 40-50 quid each or whatever, you just do both at the same time anyway, because the theory goes they've probably both similar aged and they're both probably in a similar condition, and chances are the other one may well need replacing at some point in future. But when you're running a car that isn't sort of super valuable, and this certainly is not, then you have to sort of balance things out a little bit, and spending 500 quid on two dampers on a car which may only be worth £1,500, £2,000 doesn't really add up unless you have to do it. And if you have to do it, well, sometimes you just got to bite the bullet. But I thought in this instance I would replace this one and just keep an eye on that one, see how it goes. If the other side goes, well, if it needs changing in a year or so's time, so be it, that's life. But for now, I've just replaced the one on this side, and that is the reason why, at 250 odd quid each. Yeah, say no more. So that is a job that I did just a couple of weeks ago. That was really, it was like a non-standard job. It's not the sort of thing you normally expect to have to do prior to an MOT, but it was a job that I've been meaning to do for quite some time. I managed to change it just before the MOT expired, and I have run it a little bit, and it really has transformed not just the handling, but also it appears to have got rid of that clunk as well. Classic symptoms of a damper going down are when you're driving along, as well as the bounce test, but when you're driving along, when you go over a bump in the road, you get like a shimmy back through the steering wheel. If you've got a regular vibration, that's often the wheel out of balance, but if it's just when you go over a bump or a bad pothole, that kind of thing, and you get a shimmy back through the wheel, like this, and sometimes you notice it even when you're going around a bend. If you hit a pothole or something going around the bend, and the car almost feels like it's sort of going do like this across the road fractionally, that's usually a sure sign that you've got a damper out, and that was the case with this. So it was high time to replace it. It has been replaced, and that is good, so hopefully that won't be an issue come MOT time. But what else am I going to check today prior to next week's MOT attempt? Okay, what am I going to check under here while the bonnet is raised in terms of MOT prep? Well, just have a bit of a general look around, make sure there's nothing obviously. I mean, this is basic sort of servicing stuff, but you're looking for leaks, any deteriorated hoses, belts, that kind of thing. Have a look for any potential rust issues on inner wings, especially on much older cars. Corrosion is potentially a big problem, and Jaguars are not immune to the metal moth, as you will probably well know. One thing I'm going to check, screen wash fluid. I'm going to top that up. I always buy the concentrated fluid because that way you get a lot more product. There's lots and lots of ready to use screen wash stuff out there, but that's just watered down concentrated, so you're paying for water. So buy the concentrated stuff, have a dedicated container to mix it into, and it'll go a lot further. So I'm just going to top this up. It's not too bad actually, I can see where it is. So I should really have a funnel, but never mind. There we go. That's just brought it up to the marks. That's good. It's quite a strong mix in there. I usually mix it to about 40%, that kind of thing. Instructions are always on the back of the container. This one says 50% mix for coverage down to -4 degrees centigrade. So yeah, 40-50%. You're not going to go too far wrong, but I always go for the concentrated stuff. What else am I going to check while I'm in here? Coolant level. The engine's warm at the moment because I did move it around and just sort of warm things through a bit, so I won't be taking that off until it's cooled off, but I'll be checking the coolant level, of course. Like I say, a quick bounce test just to make sure the shocks are doing their thing. I'll check the power steering reservoir as well. A lot of this is fairly basic stuff, to be honest. That's the brake fluid, isn't it? That's brake fluid. The coolant is over there. And just a general look around for any issues that the MOT man might pick up. And of course the next thing really to check is lights. Sometimes it's not all that easy to check, especially when it's a bright day like this. Headlights, rear lights, including fog lights front and rear, and reverse lights as well. You want to make sure they're all working, so that's a really simple thing to check. Sometimes you can pull the car up against a garage door and you can see the lights are working. Sometimes it's not easy to see that the aim is correct, but if the aim of the headlights is miles out, any cars coming towards you driving along will soon let you know that they are being dazzled by your incorrectly aimed headlights. Yep, so next thing is to check the lamps. Now I know the side lights come on without the ignition, so I'll just try that. First position. I think that's it. Let's have a quick look. It's on the side lights, so we'll just check those. Make sure, yep, they're on. So that's the inner two lamps. And while we're at it, we'll check the tail lights. Yep. And not forgetting, all importantly, the number plate lights. Make sure they're nice and clear as well. Right, I'm going to have to pop the ignition on. That should be headlights. As far as I know. Yep, so headlights are the outer ones, so we've got, yep, got a full set of those on. I'll just double check to make sure the backlights are still on, because it's not unknown if you've got a dodgy earth that they can go out. Right, yep, they're all on, that's good. And finally, main beam, which there's that one. We got the little blue light on the dash. Yep. Yep, we've got those. So what's left? Fog lights. Let's see if I can remember where the fog light switch is. Fog light, that one and that one. I'll have a quick whiz around it. Of course, it's a lot easier when you've got a youthful assistant nearby. But yep, there we go. Just move that back. So we have a full set of lights at the front, and we'll just check the fogs at the back. Like I say, this is an easy thing to fail on. It's the easiest thing to check beforehand. Yep, we've got both rear fogs on. Finally, we will check reversing lights. Just make sure. Yep, they're both on. So what have we got left? I'll just flick those off again, put it back into park so it doesn't roll into the hedge. Fogs off. Headlights off. Indicators that way, including the repeaters on the wings. Yep, that's on, and that's on. Certainly on older cars you could tell if an indicator was out, because it would flash at double speed. The repeater's on this side as well, that one's working, that's all good. And the back one too. So, that I think is the lights checked. What else should we check while I'm here? Yep, that seems to work. And yep, we need to have another look now at the wipers. Right, now this car has just a single wiper blade, but we still have to check it. This is an easy thing to miss. So if you pull it off, especially after winter, they often suffer. If the car's been sat outside over winter, even a fairly young wiper blade, the rubbers can suffer. So you just check to make sure there's no splits on it, because this is what the MOT man will do, so that's what we have to do. So that seems alright. We've checked the fluid, and the other thing we need to check to make sure is that the fluid is getting from the washer bottle down in this front corner up to here. Now on many cars you've got the washers are on little jets on the bonnet or maybe on the scuttle here. This one, the water actually is fed along the wiper arm and comes out somewhere around here. And I did have a problem with this once when I was fettling it last year. So let's just make sure the washers and the wipers work as they should. So it's back on with the ignition. I'll pop that on and we'll give this a little go. So the wiper works, that's alright. Press the end in and the washer fluid is coming out as well. You've got a nice clear pattern, no obvious gaps in the wiping ability of that blade. It's not the freshest blade in the world. Oops, there it goes again. But yeah, that all seems to work okay. And while we're on the subject, let's just turn the ignition off again. I need to cut the battery. While we're on the subject, just have a bit of a look to make sure there are no obvious cracks, chips, that kind of thing in the screen. You can get away in terms of MOT with a crack or a chip in certain parts of the screen, well away from the vision and indeed well away from the pattern, I believe, of the windscreen wiper. Like I say, this isn't an exact science, this isn't an exact video. I'm just sort of talking about some of my pre-flight checks. But if you've got a crack here within the path of the wiper, the wiped area directly in front of the driver, then you could well have problems. So just be mindful of that. But this one, touch wood, seems to be fine. That despite lots and lots of gravelled roads around here, so that's all good news. Right, what else are we going to consider before putting this in for an MOT next week? Now, one of the most important things that the MOT tester will check for are brakes front and rear. Foot brake and hand brake or emergency brake. depending on the terminology. And this is something that you can do some checks on, but obviously most of us don't have a rolling road at home, just to sort of check the balance of the brakes as exactly as they can do at the garage. But we can have a good go at making sure that they are, on the face of it, working correctly on a nice clear straight quiet bit of road, nice even camber, nice proper surface, not gravel. If you just brake quite firmly, if the car pulls up nice and straight without pulling, then the chances are the brakes are okay. If the car pulls, say, to the right from the driver's seat, if it pulls that way to the right, that suggests that the brakes at the front on the left are slightly down or inefficient, possibly a sticking caliper or worn down brake pads, that kind of thing. And obviously there'll be something to do, but as long as the car pulls up nice and straight without any noise or squealing or incidents, then you're probably not too far off. And whenever you have a front wheel off, just have a look at the pads. You can see the pads usually, at least the outer pad in the caliper. Sometimes the inner one's a bit tricky to see, but a torch, and if you scramble underneath, you can usually see what's going on. Check the brake discs as well, assuming it's a disc braked car. If there are loads of scores in the brake disc surface and there's a big wear lip around the outer circumference of the disc, then chances are you'll probably have to start thinking about replacing the discs and usually the pads at the same time. You might as well replace them all together. The pads don't cost much for most cars, and it's just yeah, you'd probably just do that while it's all happening at the same time, unless there's loads of meat left on them, of course, in which case you can use them. But if the pads are scored and the discs are scored, then you just replace the lot. And while your front wheel is off, you can also check some of the front suspension. Now, like I say, most of us haven't got this sort of shimmy tester that they use at the MOT station, but you can get a bit of a steer on what's happening. You're listening out for clunks in the front suspension. Any, like track rod ends, they've got the little rubber bellows on which keeps the grease in. You want to be making sure that those rubber bellows, those little bags, aren't split and haven't let all the grease out, because when the grease gets out, they wear out very, very quickly indeed. On cars with rack and pinion steering, you'll also be looking at the rubber bellows at either end of the steering rack to make sure they're not split and letting in water, because that'll soon see off your steering rack as well. So if you're, I mean, I had, like I say, I've had the wheels off this car not that long ago, and I did check the brakes, the shock absorbers, looking for leaks, make sure there's no moistness on the outside of the dampers, because that's a sign that they're on the way out. Funny enough, the one that I changed, they didn't have any visible signs at all of problems. But if I go and fetch it over here, it's quite easy. You shouldn't be able to pull that in and out like that, but obviously you can only check that when it's off the car. But there was no signs of leaks or anything like that on these. But on sort of older cars, you can often see if there's like moisture and dampness on the outside. That usually means the damper is on the way out. But this one, you can see it was completely shot. You shouldn't be able to do that, especially on a car fitted with sport suspension. And like I said, the bushes were also pretty toasty as well. So yeah, that's going in the bin. So yeah, that's brakes. They're very, very important. Like I say, make sure it's pulling up straight. You've got plenty of pad left, material left on the brake pads. Discs are in good order. Check the flexes as well, any brake pipes that you can see, because sometimes they corrode. They can corrode. Incredibly, car makers still fit brake pipes that will corrode over time, so you always want to have a bit of a look at those just to make sure they're hunky-dory, because the last thing you want is a fluid leak, brake fluid leak. That should have manifested itself if you have got a fluid leak somewhere when you check the fluid level under the bonnet, of course, and if that level keeps going down and you have to keep topping it up, then there is a leak somewhere. Rear brakes, same kind of thing, same kind of system, check they work, make sure the handbrake works. Certainly on cars like with an auto box like this one, where you tend to use park, handbrakes often don't get used all that often and they can seize up. If you watch the video I did just a couple of months ago on the MX-5 where I was overhauling the brakes on that, the handbrake on that car was pretty poor, to be honest, and I ended up replacing the calipers on it all round, because the front brakes weren't balanced, they weren't working properly, they were sticking on, and the handbrake was pretty poor as well. So I replaced all the calipers and adjusted everything up while I was at it. So yeah, that's one of the most important things you can check prior to going for an MOT attempt. Brakes, steering, all that kind of thing. While the wheel is on but the car is jacked up, you can check to see if there's any play in the wheel bearing. Some cars have taper wheel bearings which you can adjust up, certainly on older cars, probably not the case with these, I don't really know, but you can check wheel bearings. If you get a clunk while you're driving along, it can be possibly a ball joint on the way out, or the little vertical link where you've got a anti-roll bar going across the front of the car, and you have these little vertical links at either end. Sometimes the joints in the end of those can go south, and that's usually the first place to look if you have got a bit of a clunk in the front suspension, especially when you're going over a bump. So yeah, there's a lot you can check when you have the front wheel off and when you're putting the wheel back on and before you let it off the jack. But yeah, just check to see if there's any play in the wheel bearings, and yeah, basically just have a good look around. Whenever you have the opportunity to look at the brakes with the wheel off, regardless of the job you're doing, it's usually time very well spent. And while you're poking around here, have a good look at the tyres, make sure you've got no nasty cuts, have a look at the tread as well, just to make sure that the wear is nice and even. And don't forget the inside of the tyre as well, the inner wall. This is the outer wall, but try and have a look at the inner wall as well. Sometimes you might have to run the car up a ramp or up onto a curb and just sort of clamber underneath with a flashlight and just have a look, see if there's anything odd under there, because that will fail you in MOT. If your tyres are incorrectly inflated, then you will see some strange wear patterns. If they're overinflated, the centre part of the tread will wear away first. If it's underinflated, typically the outer edges of the tyre wear away first and the inner part does not. So that's something to check. And at the front end of the car, if you've got wear on the outside but not on the inside, or vice versa, then maybe your tracking is out. If you find that the car doesn't drive straight when you let your hands off the steering wheel, if it sort of drifts towards the curb or towards the centre of the road, that suggests that your tracking is probably out, and that will also wear out your tyres. So have a good look at your tyres, and that'll give you a very good clue as to the state of the car overall in this department. And yeah, these tyres look to be pretty good. You're also looking for cracks as well, age cracks. Tyres nowadays, they don't seem to last as well as maybe they did. They have got date codes on, and you sometimes get cracks even after just a fairly short mileage, but just age related. And the UV light as well, that can also lead to deterioration of tyres. So any cars that live outside that aren't covered up, the tyres, the tyre walls, the sidewalls can deteriorate quite quickly, even if the car has done very little mileage on them. So tyres, super important things to check. And after all, these are the things, this is your contact patch with the road, and if the tyres go bad, you know, you could be in for a lot of trouble. So yeah, have a good look at the tyres, sidewalls, treads, and the inner sidewalls as well, as best you can. Sometimes on the front you can go lock to lock, and that'll give you a chance to have a bit of a peer underneath, shine a light under, and just see if there's anything obvious. If you've got some bad nicks, occasionally tyres can be replaced depending where the cut is on the tyre, but sometimes you're just going to have to face the idea of changing the tyres, which is never a great thing. And again, you probably want to do them in pairs wherever possible. Okay, and what things can you check from inside the car? Well, first and foremost, you can check the visibility. If your view out of the car is obstructed by lots of dangly things hanging off your interior mirror or lots of stickers everywhere, that can be a fail. That can fail you the MOT, and you'd feel pretty silly if you failed the MOT because you had too many dangly things, or even dash cams or sat-nav things, all these sort of clobbering your screen. If your view is compromised out of the car for whatever reason, even overly tinted screens and side windows, you know, you're going to fail, and that, well, you'd feel a bit of a wally if that was the case. What else gets checked in here? Basically everything to make sure it's safe. Steering, you know, is there any play in the steering column, that kind of thing. Is there anything that's leaping out as being a potential issue? Seatbelts, make sure all the seatbelts work, click in properly and unclick again properly, and make sure there is no chafing anywhere on the belt itself, because that is an instant fail. And also don't forget to do the rear seats, including if you've got like an SUV or whatever. Make sure that the centre seatbelt also works. This is all the kind of things you have to check. And if you've got a third row seats in the back, check them as well, because the MOT tester will, so you need to do it as well beforehand. And really you're just looking around to make sure that everything is safe, there's nothing loose floating around that can affect or impair the operation of the pedals. If you sort of just keep hold drink cans and bottles floating around in the footwells, that can be a potential issue, of course. It's pretty common sense, really. What else do you need to do? Make sure that the seats are firmly attached as well, because you know, if you can shake the seat around and it's wobbling around, that is never a great thing. Like I say, we'll go in the back as well. We'll just make sure, we'll click them in just to make sure they all work properly. And like I say, this is really just a case of trying to preempt everything that the MOT man, we'll do the centre one while we're at it, you're trying to preempt everything that the MOT tester is going to check for, and the more things you can do ahead of them checking it, the better. You also need to make sure all the doors open and shut properly, the inner door handles work correctly. That's something else that you need to make sure functions, because that's a safety related issue. In case you had a bit of a shunt, you want to be able to get your doors open. Windows, make sure they work. They need to be able to work, even though electric windows typically only work with the ignition on, they still have to work. Handbrake, well, we've already covered that one in the braking section. Make sure it just comes up a few clicks. You don't want to be getting up near the headlining before the handbrake actually does anything, so check that as well. And while you've got the doors open, check your door mirrors. Make sure the mirrors work and they're not cracked and obscured in any way at all. Same for the centre rear view mirror as well. That can fail you in MOT if these are badly deteriorated in any way at all, broken, etc. That's another easy one to miss. Oh, and before I forget, blowing exhausts. That can be a problem come MOT time. I mean, blowing exhausts are bad at the best of times. They sound horrible. But it can also lead to a MOT fail if it's excessively noisy, or even if you've fitted a non-standard exhaust and it is excessively noisy, that can fail your MOT. Same as if you fit the incorrect type or typeface of number plates, that can fail you the MOT as well. But back to exhausts, that can cause all sorts of problems. On the face of it, you might just think, oh, blowing exhaust, that doesn't really affect anything. But of course, emissions is a big part of MOT testing nowadays and has been for many, many years. And if you've got a blow at the front, that can screw up the readings to the lambda sensors either side of the catalytic converter, and you'll get error messages on the dashboard, and it can lead to a whole host of issues. If you've got any error messages showing or any light showing on the dash at all, that is a fail. Doesn't matter what it's for. But if you've got a check engine light on, or ABS or traction control light or whatever it might be, that's going to fail, even if the actual system relating to that warning or error message or light is actually working correctly. If the error message, the telltale, the idiot light on the dashboard is saying there's a problem, you're going to fail the MOT. So you really want to try and avoid that if you can. So again, the more prep you can do, the more checks and preparation you can do prior to going to the MOT, well, that just saves a load of time and hassle. But yeah, just check to make sure you've got no engine lights on, no blowing exhaust, and you can be good to go. A couple of years ago we actually put a new exhaust on Mrs. OCC's Honda Estate, and I thought we'd be good for quite a few years, but last year it started blowing and I thought, oh God, we're going to have to change the exhaust again. We actually took it to a local garage and he said, oh no, it's only split. I had a look underneath and it split towards, I think it's on the back silencer, it split where the pipe goes into there, and it was blowing and chuffing away and sounding all pretty unfortunate. But he was able to weld it up, and sort of 20 quid later, and he welded a little patch on, and it's still going now. We may have to change it in the next year or two, we'll see, but it certainly bought us a lot more time with that. So instead of having to spend a few £100 on a new exhaust, you know, the guy at the garage, he fixed it for £20 and a firm handshake. So that was really, really good. But yeah, blowing exhaust, you want to get that sorted because it can lead to all sorts of problems. Now, as I've already touched upon, there are some things that you can't really test at home. Certain aspects of the suspension, the drivetrain, that kind of thing, and the biggie, emissions. Very few of us have emissions testers at home, and the requirements for cars in order to pass the test does vary a little bit on the age of car. If the car is sort of early to mid 1990s or before, often it's just a visual smoke test on the petrol engine I'm talking about here, and you don't actually have to record and test the specific emissions, the CO2 and all this kind of thing. But once you get from sort of mid to late 90s onwards, you do have to go through the full emissions thing. Obviously, if your car is putting clouds of smoke out at startup or when you accelerate, and old diesel cars are particularly bad for this, which is one reason I'm not really a big fan of older diesel cars. that's just an instant fail. If you're putting clouds of smoke out, or oil smoke, or burning smoke, whatever, that is bad. And sometimes you can still fail the MOT even if you're not putting any visible smoke out, and that can, if you've got problems in emissions, that can be down again to lambda sensors, or if you've got a blowing exhaust, that can screw up the readings. And because everything is so sort of interlinked nowadays on cars, not so much with these oldies, but certainly on later cars, that can, you can fail for emissions when you think you're probably home and dry and perfectly running fine, no visible smoke, that kind of thing. So that is something you can't really test for too much other than a visual check. Now, clearly this car doesn't have a tow bar. The Jeep that came before it did have a tow bar. And another thing to check for the MOT is the tow bar in good condition? Is it firmly bolted? The mountings for it, are they all good and secure? Because this is something that we'll have a look at during the MOT test. If you've got a rotten chassis that this is bolted to, you may have problems. And it's not just the tow bar itself, it's also the wiring. You have to check the wiring, make sure that that all works. And the lights on your trailer board or on the back of your trailer, caravan, they have to correspond with the lights on the car, because if you've got a brake light coming on the car, but that is putting the tail light or the indicators on the trailer, then clearly something is awry and it'll need looking at, and the MOT tester will spot that. And of course, the other biggie, which I touched upon before when I was discussing things under the bonnet, is rust. Rust on older cars, that can be a real killer, and I'm sure many of you watching this video will be all too familiar with that. Even on cars which on the face of it are fairly young. I mean, this is 23 years old now, so it's not that young, but even cars that are sort of 10 to 15 years old, they can start exhibiting some problems with rust. Now, there are two areas to check. You've got the visual area around here where you just walk around and look generally, and underneath. In terms of up top, from what you can see here, you want to make sure there are no sharp jagged edges. So I'm talking excessively rusty wheel arches, corners of the wings. If you've got chrome bumpers and the chrome is all pickling up, leaving razor sharp edges on the bumper corners perhaps, or the overriders, that can also be a fail as well. And obviously older cars are MOT exempt now, but you still want to make sure they're right, and I know a lot of people still put their old cars in for MOTs just to be on the safe side. But excessive corrosion around the body, that can cause you problems come MOT time. And then of course there is the underside, which often only gets inspected every year at MOT time, and the rest of the year the rust just munches away. And as a friend of mine once said, while welding up I think it was my Triumph Spitfire many years ago, rust never sleeps. And when you add in road dirt, dampness, wetness, water, salt if you run your car all year round, rust can really cause problems underneath. Cosmetic rust, surface rust doesn't really matter in most cases, but if you've got heavy corrosion rust through anywhere near suspension mounting points, and I know there are particular measurements in terms of how far away you can get away with rust in relation to suspension pickup points, damper mountings, that kind of thing. But if you've got hole through rust where you could put your thumb through, that is going to be something that the MOT tester is going to take a very close interest in. So yeah, visual inspection of the upper body and have a bit of a poke around underneath and make sure there's no heavy corrosion anywhere close to suspension pickup points. Anything structural, box sections, that kind of thing, if they're rusting, then you want to get that sorted really before the MOT. And it's just common sense really. If a car is heavily rusted underneath, then it potentially can be unsafe, and the MOT tester isn't going to like that very much at all. So that really is just my update on the Jaguar. It is going for its MOT next week, and those are the things that I've checked and inspected prior to it going in for the MOT. Of course it could still fail. You can't guarantee that you're going to pick everything up just by having a poke around at home, but you can certainly avoid the easy stuff, the headlamps, bulbs, the windscreen wipers, that kind of thing. Seat belts, make sure they all work. This is all pretty easy stuff to check, and the more you can do yourself and the more things you can cross off the potential failure list, the more chance you've got of actually your car passing its MOT. There are lots and lots of other things that the MOT inspector will check for, which I haven't covered in this video, because after all, I'm not a professional mechanic, I don't run the garage, I'm not an authorised MOT tester. This is just a chat about some of the things I've been checking on the Jag before I put this in for an MOT, but the seasoned eye of the MOT inspector will have a much closer look at the car than I will, and he has a lot more facilities and tools to hand in order to do that. Will it pass its MOT? I don't know. I'm reasonably confident, but there could be something that I've missed, and you never know. It's in the lap of the gods, really. But I've done my bit. I've done as much as I can to be reasonably confident, at least putting it in for an MOT, because I don't want to waste my time, I don't want to waste their time, I don't want to spend money when I don't have to. So the more I can do in advance, the better the chances of passing. There are loads of other things which can cause fails, some things that you might not even think about, like the battery retaining bracket. If you haven't got a battery retaining bracket, or it's loose, that can fail you the MOT. If your spare tyre is in a bad shape, or torn or deteriorated, whatever, you can fail the MOT on that. You can't fail the MOT if you take the spare wheel out and don't have a spare wheel and tyre in the back of the car when you go for the MOT. But if there is a spare wheel and tyre in the car, it has to be good, usable, legal tread, and all that kind of thing. So there's lots and lots of little things that an MOT can pick you up on. And like I say, unless you're really an MOT inspector yourself, you can't really be expected to remember all this. But the more you can do yourself in advance, the better the outcome is likely to be. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll do a little bit of an update when I have actually taken the Jag for its MOT, and we'll see what happens. Does it pass? Does it not? And if it doesn't pass, hopefully it won't be anything too serious, but that only time will tell. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll just report back a little bit later in a few days' time once I've taken this for its first MOT in our ownership. Well folks, it is a few days later, and this morning was Jaguar MOT time. Did it pass? Did it fail? Well, I'm happy to report it passed. So that was great news. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking taking a car for an MOT, as I'm sure many of you will know, especially when you haven't MOT'd the car during your ownership. So this is the first time we've taken it in for an MOT ourselves, and you never really know quite what's going to happen. So that is a big relief. Just one minor advisory, just a little bit of bubbling on one inner wheel arch, the inner wing, just sort of behind the wheel kind of thing. So it's a bit awkward to see without the car being up in the air on the ramp. But yeah, I can get that. I'll get that sorted out in the very near future. But yeah, back on the road, legal again, until the next MOT in 12 months' time. So if there's been anything of use or interest in this particular video about MOT preparation, roadworthiness check preparation, that kind of thing, please let me know in the comments. If you'd like me to do more videos like this, please let me know in the comments as well. Give it a like, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so, because that helps the channel survive, as does channel membership. If you'd like to see the channel continue to grow as it has been doing lately, please think about channel membership, because that really does help and just evens out the ups and downs of YouTube life. So thank you so much for watching this particular video. Hope it was of interest. Please keep an eye on the channel for more videos, and loads more planned for the rest of 2025. So thanks for now. Goodbye.